So I'm Robert Hodges, and I'll be running this fireside chat. I'm going to ask the questions, but also participate in the answers. It's my pleasure to introduce Tatiana and Peter. Why don't you, let's just dive right in, and please introduce yourself and tell us about your open source business. And let's start with Tatiana.
Thank you, Robert. And yes, my name is Tatiana Krupenia, and I'm a CEO of dbeaver. dbeaver is a universal database management tool that supports like more than 100 databases and more than 10 million users around the globe. So we have different products, and two of them is open source, like truly open source. Really happy to be here today.
Yeah, and my name is Peter Zaitsev. I am a founder and for many years CEO of Percona, a company which helps people to run open source databases. And also, in addition to that, I help to start companies like Altinity, FerretDB, Karoot, right, and have been advising kind of few others as well.
Great, and my name is Robert Hodges, as you can see from the slide, and I am CEO of Altinity. I've been working here for about 6 years. Altinity is a service provider and a cloud platform provider for ClickHouse, a very popular open source analytics database. So with that beginning, let's just dive into what I think is the single biggest question that people have with open source based businesses, and that is, how do you get people to pay for free stuff? And I'm going to hand this over to Peter to kick this off.
Yes, well, yes, in my opinion, there are two things here. Now, first, if you look at majority of the open source businesses, they don't have a people paying for free stuff, right? There typically is some separation, and not all the software is open source software. And that is actually where Percona is different, right? At Percona, if you look, we do not have any software which is not open source. Everything, all the software which you produce is open source, and people still pay for that, especially in our target market, which is enterprise companies, right? And when people ask about that, I often have this analogy to saying, hey guys, have you ever bought bottled water? And yes, most people say they do, right? And well, you know what? People spend shitload of money on bottled water when there is essentially the same water available from a tap, right? Absolutely free for you, right? And that is often the difference, right? Where we can say, well, the proprietary software is like Coca-Cola, right? People buy Coca-Cola, and there's a big market for that, right? And open source software is like water, where you can still sell it, and that can be, like those $5 bottles, right? In this case, because a lot of the value comes in convenience, packaging, assurance, right? But that is not some kind of water, but their water, it's good for you, right? And I think that is a very big comparison. Many enterprise companies, for example, well, you know what? They do not want that idea. Oh, I go and download the source code somewhere on the internet and then go on forums and hope some community member with heart is going to help me. They want the contract, right? They want to make sure we understand that software comes from supply chain. They want support when they need it, they want warranties and so on and so forth, right? And that is how even purely open source software can be sold.
Actually, it's a very interesting idea because, from my experience, I could say that there are different business models, like how people actually can take money from the open source project. And this one, when you actually sell the convenience or, trust or safety, it's also a very beneficial way to get some money from the open source. And in dbeaver, it's a bit different because we have like the real separation between products. Like we have the open source products that have some like features and users and market, and together with that we have this like commercial products that have some differences. And actually the value of the enterprise products is different. It's not the same as an open source. And actually this developing of the commercial products helps us to support the open source products as well, like support the project development in general. So this is this kind of balance that we have in our business model.
Yeah, Tatiana, so that's basically an open core model where, and a question for you is, how do you get people to step up and buy the enterprise version? Because I'll tell you, as I think I use open source dbeaver. I love it. It's great. But there's there's a little bit of activation energy required to get somebody to buy that more complete model. How do you handle that?
It's about like targeting the right market, because at the end of the day you want to understand like who will be the user of your product, so who need the features that you will provide, not for free but in the paid versions of this. And here I agree with Peter as well, because for us this market is the enterprise. It's a businesses who wants to have like additional stuff. For example, I don't know, if you work with any database, I don't know, Cassandra or Postgres or MySQL, and it's your pet project, most likely you will log into the database with a login and password, and that's it, because it's only you. And like, what else do you need to do? Yeah, but if you work for the big bank, most likely you have something like your database is somewhere in the cloud, and you connect to this database through, I don't know, SSO with multi-factor authentication and all of these things that usually people from community, they never touch it, they don't need it. But enterprises really has to have this kind of stuff.
Yeah, so that's a great explanation. And by the way, I'm hearing there's a lot of love for dbeaver out in the chat right now. So yeah, we totally know where you're coming from. Our business model is yet again different from Peter and Tatiana. So we offer support for ClickHouse, and that's really kind of an insurance offering. Kind of as Peter described, people, large companies or companies for whom this is analytics or business critical, they just want to know there's somebody that's going to back them up if it works, or if it fails to work. The software itself is completely open source. So we don't have an enterprise version of ClickHouse. It's not our intention to have one. The other part of our business, and actually the larger part, is cloud platform. So we have a cloud platform that runs ClickHouse. Again, it's completely open source ClickHouse. It's running underneath. Not only ClickHouse is open, but pretty much everything in the reporting stack is open source software, and we just manage it. And the management software is completely proprietary. So people are basically hiring us because we offer the convenience of running it for them, and we bundle it with very, very deep support. And then there's a final thing, we can manage it practically anywhere. So we built technology that allows us even to reach into people's VPCs running in the cloud and manage it for them. But we maintain this really, really strong layering boundary between the open source part, which is completely free, and the management and support that we provide on top of it. So, Peter, I wonder, like how have you seen? You've been watching this for a long time. I wonder how you've seen these models evolve, because this is something that I know you're really interested in.
Oh yeah. I think there has been a lot of evolution in the business models in this case, and I think the biggest one, in my opinion, came with this. The cloud, right, which I think is sort of like a hijacked the model for a lot of technology, especially like for core databases, right? Maybe not so much for like a developer's tools like dbeaver, right? And I think that would get a lot of people, struggling, and often go all the way to change a license to non-open source, right? We know like a MongoDB or Redis, right, and a bunch of others would change a license to something like a source available cloud non-competitive license, exactly because you can say, hey guys, we get the big cloud vendors came in and we cannot compete with them, right? So I think that was the worrying trend. But I think what is interesting in this case, in many cases people say, well, we open source something, right? And then people come, they take it, and they compete with us. How do they dare, right? And that is, to me, is a very interesting question, because that is exactly how open source is designed to work, right? What you are creating in an open source ecosystem, right? Well, the value of that and why people love it, it's all because it's available for them, for ecosystem and large, to use as they do, including competing with you, right? Take away opportunity for those kind of competitors to be created, and you take away a lot of value from open source, in my opinion. But a lot of companies, I think, over the last 2 years, it's kind of essentially just a classical venture-funded product companies, which would go and say, hey, you use open source for marketing, then it's convenient, right? And then, you know what, we think it's no more suit us, we'll go ahead and boom, change the license. That's what we've saw again and again.
I think what I'd like to do is just kind of riff off that and go to our next question, which is, I think, a really important one for all of us as managers of these companies. And that is, how does your company give back to open source communities and projects? And Peter, since you were already kind of on this topic, why don't you talk about how you've done it?
Yeah, well, I will start kind of many years ago, right? And when Percona started, we actually did not have software. But I think we as a company have a very good impact and have been giving back a lot to the MySQL ecosystem, right, through a lot of information, right? Like I helped to write a book, right? We had a lot and other stuff. We helped a lot of people to do better with MySQL, not by contributing the code, but contributing to experience. And I think this is very important, especially in a database space, because let's face it, very few people are actually capable writing the database kernel code, right? But there's so much more people can contribute in the ecosystem in large, being that information, tools, and so on and so forth, right? And then Percona actually grew from there. We have tools like Percona Toolkit or Percona Extra Backup, right, which make running the tools better, and then finally come into solutions such as Percona Server for MySQL and others, right, which are essentially extended and improved version of those kind of like a crippled community versions, right, released by Oracles and others, right? So that's how we do it. But let me also touch on one thing, right? That you ask how you do it. I think it's also important to talk about why you do it, right? And in my opinion, it's very important when you have an intersect of you provide the value for community or good to a world, and then that is being a good business, right? Because if those two things come together, that is kind of glorious, right? Because there is only so much you can just, spend money to write on, pure charity and expecting nothing in return, right? For Percona, frankly, that was fantastic marketing, right? Our software, open source software, that was one of the things which put us in the map. That's customers come to us, and that's they stick with Percona.
Tatiana, how about you? How does dbeaver give back?
And, I just I have so many thoughts around what Peter just said. And first of all, about this, big companies that identify themselves as an open source, but not being the real open source at the same time. They don't have compatible open source license, but they won't be kind of a part of the open source community because of these major benefits from marketing and support from the development community and so on. But the truth is that if you want to be a real part, you have to give something back. Without that, it just doesn't make sense, and it's community is quite sensitive for that. So it's not like you cannot say that no one even notice if you don't contribute or if you don't return anything. And in dbeaver, we have even a few directions how we what we do for the open source. And first of all, yes, we have to open source products. We are a product company. What can we do? We can do the open source products. And in our open source products, we're also trying to support other open source projects. For example, we always welcome new contributors, and we always welcome new open source database vendors. So if some open source database appear and they need an interface, it's very easy to like get a connector in the Beaver for their database. And I know that it's very, very helpful for many new open source database projects. And also, of course, we're trying to not doing only our project. Just like recently, we released the open source GTPC driver for libSQL, so everyone can just start using it. It's available in Maven and GitHub, so take it, use it, more than welcome. And the third direction, of course, if we can, we're trying to contribute to the big other open source projects. I won't lie, it's not only because we are so volunteering and want to support the open source, but because we also like rely on these technologies. But if we can contribute to the open source, we're always happy to share and improve something there as well. So
Great. Yeah. So Altinity, we share a lot of the patterns that you've both described. We contribute back to ClickHouse. That's something we started doing 5-6 years ago. At this point, I think we've done about 600, close to 600 PRs, which have gone to upstream ClickHouse, everything from storage to security. So I think that's a pretty standard pattern. We also have ecosystem tools, very much like what Peter described. I'll just give 2 examples. We wrote an operator that most people use to run ClickHouse on Kubernetes. That's turned out to be probably our single most successful piece of open source software. But the second one is we wrote a backup tool for ClickHouse. Again, databases just really need backups. It's usually one of these things that people don't like to write. So if you do a good one, it makes people happy. I think there's another way that you can contribute, which is just to share information about these complex open source products. And like Peter, like Tatiana, this is something we do. We do piles of videos. We do conferences like this. Actually, that's part of that's part of that whole program. I just want to mention one final thing that we haven't talked about, which is I think one of the best ways that you can give back is to put the core open source software into a foundation. I think if you really care, I think if you really care about, making sure that the software remains open, this is a way to put it somewhere where it's safe. And not only, does it give assurance to users, but you won't be tempted to go mess with it. And that's the thing. We'll talk, if we have time, we'll get to talking about funding, but I think that's a really key step forward. By the way, we're getting some interesting questions from the crowd, and I want to take one because I think it's really goes to the role of open source vendors and businesses. There's somebody asking, how can we avoid product and platform cost in utilizing these open source platforms? How can we tie many open source tools and platforms easily for a company or enterprise? Is there a solution or pattern in your experience? And I'm going to throw this one over to Tatiana because I know you guys talk to so many databases, and you may have some thoughts about how that can really work successfully.
actually, it's an interesting question because yes, the Beaver support like hundreds, more than 100 databases, and it's just impossible to have all of them, for example, in your test environment. And that is where we really, really appreciate the help of community, because why I love the Beaver community is because after the release of the product, if you have any kind of issue, you will get the response in 2 hours, like immediately. If you like break something for some particular database, you will get it very quickly, and you can fix it. And really, people very open to help you to improve the product, to like remove these issues for them. And but it's a very good question also about like you cannot rely only on community. You need to get a lot of stuff and maintain it by yourself. So, and there are different ways, and one of them is like invest something that you get from the like production, from the commercial products to your open source project, and like get this balance between them. And also, I could say that open source is in general, is a real community. It's really easy to have the partners who are ready to share with you and like everything, including the environments, including the some platforms and so on. So many products support other open source projects that it's very easy to become a part of the ecosystem.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
look, yeah, I think that is a very, very good question, right? And in my opinion, that is often where the open source kind of falls behind a little bit, right? If you look, think about the earlier days, like 20 years ago, like a Microsoft Pro platform, which everything is sleek and integrated, or now we have, Amazon or Google Cloud, where actually everything kind of talks to each other, right? And in open source community, it does take more time, right? For this kind of democratic process, everybody to agree how to integrate and so on and so forth, right? And for me, I think it's very interesting what we see now. There is a lot of innovation that goes on, not just in a separate project, but in terms of how to do that interoperability with them, right? Like, I mean, Tatiana, well, we have a product which talks to a whole bunch of databases, where people building tools, how you can maybe replicate data from one database to another, right? Like we at Percona have solutions like Percona Everest, right? Which is saying, hey, how can you, through the same GUI, deploy multiple database solutions, right? In this case, so. But for advice for enterprises, in this case, it is very important. If you look at the open source community, you often are part of a process. You help to create your future, right? So I would encourage, not just say, oh shit, all the open source out there is crap. Okay, maybe it is. Go and make it better, right? Instead of paying money to, oracles and whatsoever, so Larry gets even bigger yacht, go and spend money, right, on the making the open source project you use better, because that is how you benefit. I'm all with all the open source community.
Yeah, and Peter, I want to jump in and just talk about a pattern that we see constantly that is a way that customers, users deal with this issue, but it's also an opportunity for us as a software business. And that is many large companies have exactly this problem of trying to pick the right open source software and build it. So they actually build platforms. And this is very much the case with analytics. For example, running on Kubernetes, when we talk to most large companies, we find that they actually have a curated version of Kubernetes. They don't just run something like EKS. They run it for their application teams. They've made a bunch of choices about security. That's a big place where you can make mistakes, and you don't want to do it wrong. And then they pick the software that runs on it and even give people procedures for running it. So you can either do that yourself, or you can pay a vendor to run a cloud service like Snowflake that essentially does, which tries to bundle. That's proprietary, but it bundles a bunch of stuff together. And so I think this is a really important pattern if you're thinking about selling open source, particularly in the cloud, is like how to answer this question of making this tangled mess of software run for people and be easy to use. And I think there's a real I think there's a real interplay here.
Yeah.
Tatiana, did you have
Yes,
something to add to that?
yes, I just thought that it actually returned us to the first point that we discussed in the beginning
Yeah,
about like, selling the nice, beautiful bottle of water.
yeah,
Uh, because again, it's a lot of opportunities here for the open source projects itself.
yeah,
They really like often stuck with this idea like, okay, how can I sell something to the enterprise, because we are just open source, we don't understand, we don't know where to start. And that's exactly where you can start, because yes, enterprises need not just water, they need a bottle, they need something that will feed their infrastructure, that will
right,
feed their environment. And this is where you can help, because
yeah.
open source in general in helping people, it's helping people in community, but it's also about how we can help the enterprises to adopt these beautiful technologies.
Yeah, I'm going to jump a little bit on our questions, and I want to just have some. We can do a little self-criticism here. What is one mistake that you made related to open source that you'd like to help other people avoid?
I think we can start with Peter. Peter,
Oh,
These are
okay,
doing it
okay.
longer,
I was just
and this
going
one
to
was
do
good.
that ladies first,
Yeah.
right? But no. I
Yeah.
understand. Our ladies are always wonderfully perfect. So yes, with mistakes, that's where we start. Well, you know what? First, I think this is something about the mistakes, right? I think a lot of mistakes you do are important part of the process, part of education, part of growth, right? So looking at that, oh, it's better if I wouldn't do that, but well, maybe that wouldn't bring us to the point there they are. There, a mistake, I would say, it's not like a very like specific perhaps, right? But I think moving faster, right? That is something which is a thing, right? I think like if you, in a retrospect, you say, hey, there have been so many things where we could have moved faster, right? For example, hey, starting working with Kubernetes, right? In Kubernetes Corner, we have a very solid Kubernetes portfolio right now, but we probably could have started on that, a couple of years earlier, right? Yeah.
yeah, and I agree completely for 100% because it's the thing that I see all the time that people think too much instead of trying. And the open source gives you so many flexibility and freedom to try different things that you can actually take and try and see what happens. And not just thinking like, oh, will it work or not, or what will be the following steps and so on. And the only thing that I don't want to say that you don't have to think at all. It's just you have to understand what you are trying to achieve. What is the goal? What is your audience? So, and that's maybe the main thing.
Yeah, I'm going to just say something which is probably going to make me look bad, but I'm a programmer. I've been doing it for about 50 years. And the problem that I always have is I think about the code and not how it's benefiting the user. If you run a business, you absolutely have to focus on what it is you're doing for their users and how you're making their lives better. And as a CEO, collect money for it. And so and because you have people who depend on you. You're paying salaries. You have investors. You have users who depend on you being around. So this is really this is a really important point in building an open source business. And this conversation could go on, I think, practically all morning, but it looks like we're at time. I'd like to thank
Okay.
Tatiana Krupenya, Peter Zaitsev, Josh Leaf, as well as Software Guru, who's running this whole thing. It's been wonderful to talk to you. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to contact us
Thank
out
you.
there in the chat, and we'll talk more. Bye, everybody.